The Navigating Disability podcast often discusses topics including disability, injury, mental health, and mentions of sensitive issues such as trauma and suicide. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care while listening. Welcome to the Navigating Disability podcast. Today we're speaking with Hayley Thiele, whose journey into the world of disability advocacy began in the most personal way, when her youngest daughter was born with Wiedemann-Steiner syndrome, a rare genetic condition. As she navigated the complex and often overwhelming NDIS to secure the support her daughter needed, Hayley also faced her own health battle, being diagnosed with cervical cancer. Through these life-altering experiences, Hayley learned firsthand the resilience, persistence, and vulnerability required to advocate for a child while fighting for her own health. Today, she shares her story with honesty and heart, offering a rare and powerful perspective on what it means to balance hope and hardship, and how she found strength in the face of unimaginable challenges. Hayley's journey is one of fierce love, determination, and the unwavering belief that even in our hardest seasons, we can create change for our families and for others walking a similar path. Welcome, Hayley.
Well, thank you. I sound really impressive with that intro.
You absolutely are impressive. Wow. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. I guess, like you said, I am Hayley. I am the mum of three sassy, wonderful young women. I have Maggie, who's 10, Pippa is 6, and oops, forgot the middle child. What a surprise. Aria is 8. And yeah, so oh my goodness. And so yeah, we were thrown into the world of parenting a child with a disability unexpectedly when Pippa was born. We sort of went into the third baby expecting that, you know, by that stage you can just put them in the corner in a bouncer, can't you? And they just drag themselves up. We were ready. But she had other ideas, and, you know, if she didn't enter this world, I wouldn't be here today talking to you lovely ladies.
Are you able to give us a little bit of background on Pippa's diagnosis? Because I, for one, haven't heard of it before. So I think it would be, a little bit of knowledge is always good.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's relatively new to us still, the Wiedemann's diagnosis. And so you'll hear me say Wiedemann-Steiner only because that pronunciation is burnt into my brain from her geneticist because it's a German it's from like a German geneticist found it. So that's where it's, you know, they pronounce it as Wiedemann-Steiner. But basically, the executive summary is, so Pippa was born, you know, very boring pregnancy, beautiful, spontaneous vaginal delivery, and everything was great. She was my smallest baby, so I'm nearly 6 foot. And so my other babies were, you know, around that 4 kilo mark, and she didn't even make 3. And I was like, what do you do with something this small? You know, like it's so small. But I just put that down to I was really healthy in her pregnancy. I'd lost about 20, 30 kilos between her and my other 2, but, you know, wasn't that. And so then we really struggled with feeding in those first few months. So she wasn't putting on weight. I thought that I was a crappy cow. So, you know, put her over to the bottle. But even that, it just still wasn't working. And in the background, I had an amazing pediatrician. And I know I'm really lucky in this instance because a lot of families have to fight very hard to be listened to, whereas I had the opposite, where I was telling my pediatrician that he was a wanker and he was overreacting, and we had a great relationship. And so at about 3 months old was when he's like, all right, enough's enough. It's time to, you know, we've done it your way for a while, and now it's time to let me do my job. And I was like, okay. So we started a couple of hospital admissions to just sort of try and get some baselines. And she had a genetic array test at one of those, and it came back that she had a micro deletion, so a 2q13 micro deletion. And we got that phone call, and it was literally just a, hey, yeah, your kid's genetic testing has come up to show something, but genetics is really busy. So you can expect an appointment with them in about 12 months. And so you go, great. Yeah, fantastic. Okay. And lucky we're pretty relaxed people anyway. But then she just continued to just not thrive. And, we had that wonderful failure to thrive diagnosis. And we got sent down to Women's and Children's Hospital in Adelaide, which is about 3.5 hours from our home. We were living in regional South Australia. And I guess it was that admission where I went, oh my God, something's actually happening, like something's wrong with my baby. And so we were admitted, and we had a speechie come in, and she listened to Pip feed, and she's like, this kid is aspirating. Like, this is, everything is going into her lungs. And a nasogastric tube was put in at 3 months old, and she's 6 now, and she's still got a peg. So we moved to a peg. So I guess that was the real start of our journey. And then because you're an inpatient, you then jump the queue. And that's been the biggest learning of everything for my experience in those early days with Pip. Because we spent so much bloody time in hospital, we were like, jump the queue for genetics, we jumped the queue for sleep studies, we jumped the queue for specialist appointments. So from that perspective, it was great. And we were able to get a really holistic overview of where we were at. Whereas if we were waiting for those bloody outpatient appointments, which for us was like an 8-hour round trip, I don't think we would have been able to be as proactive as what we were. So we got the tube put in. She was nil by mouth, and then we went home after 2 weeks, but she still wasn't putting on weight, even though she was now finally getting the 6 feeds and continuous feeds and all that sort of stuff. And so we were admitted again, and this was then when we got linked in with respiratory, and we had a sleep study. And so she had chronic sleep apnea, and she was put on oxygen for 24/7, and that was the game changer. So I think on her first night on oxygen, she put on 100 grams, which I know, yeah. So she was working really, really hard. But I guess from a mum perspective, it was the oxygen that broke me, because the nasogastric tube, I had no idea. I had no idea what aspiration was. I was still apologizing to nurses that they had to look after us. I was like, we shouldn't be here. And every time they came in, I'm just like, you must be looking at me, judging me, going, why are you here? Like, I was just in complete denial now when I look back. And so the oxygen, though, that was different because we had to go to training before you're allowed to be discharged with your kid on oxygen. So by this point, she's on continuous feeds with the nasogastric tube. And then now she's attached to this thing, and in hospital, you don't think much about it because it's just plugged into the wall. You don't really think about what it looks like at home. And I just remember them wheeling out the oxygen bottle and I just lost my shit. I just sat in the corner. I was the person that I would feel sorry for because I just sat in the corner quietly weeping. Like I just had tears rolling down my eyes because they brought out the travel canister, and I was like, I've got 2 other kids at home. I've got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. We go hiking, we go camping, we go to playgroup. Like, how does this actually work? So, and then when you're actually home, I know now there's oxygen concentrators and things like that. It's definitely a bit easier for some people. But when you are, those typical gas bottles that you have, So here you are walking around your house with a bloody sack truck with your oxygen bottle, with your brand new baby, with a feeding pump on there, getting no sleep. And then I swear my toddlers, they just knew, watch the tubes, watch the tubes. That's literally what it was. Like, yeah, I look back now and I'm so proud of us. But yeah, at the time it was a big adjustment.
So how's Pippa doing now? Sorry, Kate, I'm invested.
Yeah, so I choose my own adventure, don't I? So we went along life just sort of going with 2Q13, thinking that the micro deletion was what was causing all of her problems. And so Dave and I were tested. Dave's my husband, and he actually came back as a carrier for the 2Q. And so then we had to have our other kids tested and blah, blah. But when she was 3, I think it was, we had our annual checkup with the geneticist, and she's like, it's just not making sense that her needs are still as complex as what they are. She's like, I just don't think 2Q is the right thing here. And especially the fact that Dave can have the deletion and him not have any side effects. So she's like, would you mind if we did the full genome sequencing? And I was like, you've got her blood on file, so I don't have to traumatize her in that way. So it's like, what have we got to lose? But even that, they make you sign a waiver, because in that sequencing, you might find out about the Alzheimer's gene, the ovarian cancer gene, all that sort of stuff. And once you know that information, you can't unknow. So, that was a little bit confronting. And it was from that. So those results take 6 months to come back. And so it was from there that they identified the difference on one of her genes. And Dave and I had to be tested again to make sure we didn't carry it. Genetics is fascinating. And because we didn't carry it, it was classed as a de novo, which means she's the first person in our family to have that genetic, for lack of a better word, defect. And so that's then how she was diagnosed with the Wiedemann-Steiner. And that makes sense. Like I look up Wiedemann-Steiner kids and I see Pippa. And so that has been really positive in a way, because there's no longer any what ifs, like, oh, we don't know. It's at least, even though it's very rare, there's a Wiedemann-Steiner foundation in America. There's actually research going into it and that sort of thing, which I sort of find a little bit comforting.
And when you know what you're dealing with, you can deal with it.
Yeah.
And you can get ideas of what works and what doesn't. Can I take you back to the time when all this was happening? And you said probably the clincher was when Pippa was put on oxygen. What was your mental state like after that?
It's funny because I sort of think of myself as 2 versions of Pippa's mum. I sort of have this version now, and I would say that that's probably post my health journey. And then I have the woman back there. So I can say now, from my perspective, I was just in complete denial. So my mental health, I almost feel like there was no mental health, because I was just in pure survival. And it was just, this is how it is. And there's worse people, way worse off than us. So suck it up and just get it going. So there was not a lot of kindness to myself then. And you guys know there's always someone worse off. So you sort of feel a little bit guilty having a pity party. So it was a bit like, well, like we had this baby and let's just get on with it. But in saying that, we are really lucky with the support system that we had. It just happens that Dave and I actually genuinely like each other. So that's always a bonus. Don't get me wrong. There's times where we don't like each other, but I genuinely like the guy. And so we are definitely stronger together. And we, like my family, we have an amazing group of friends, and they really stepped up. I do not know how we would have gotten through those first few years without them. And it was things as simple as just, here's some meals picking up Maggie and Aria from kindy in school when Pippa and I were on an unexpected hospital admission. And I think it was also to letting people help. I would say my mental health probably struggled the most, not so much at the diagnosis area, those first 3 to 6 months of finding out what was going on and getting into, learning what we were dealing with. I would probably say it was more the 12 months down the track where I knew where we were at, and the kid was still aspirating, and we've still got aspiration pneumonia. So we would be admitted to hospital for an IV antibiotic tune-up sort of every 3 to 4 months. And those would go for 2 weeks. That's when my mental health would really struggle, because it was literally, I was 4 hours away from home. My babies and my husband are still in Port Augusta. And Pip and I have just, for those of you listening to this and watching this, the River Torrens is very well known in Adelaide, and it's very close to the Women's and Children's Hospital. I have walked so many laps of that bloody river with Pippa in the pram, and that was just how I kept myself sane, really.
So how has your husband coped through it all?
We have a bit of a joke. I'm a feelings person. So my background is psychology and, working in trauma-informed practices. So I'm all about the feelings, and we sometimes say he's emotionally bankrupt, which he's not. He's not. I shouldn't say that. But he really took on that stoic,
the protector role.
He was the glue. He was the glue. He was my rock, and he was everyone's rock. But then he would sort of let things out where he felt a lot of guilt, especially because, she was 3 or 4 when we got the Wiedemann-Steiner diagnosis. So he spent all that time thinking her issues were his fault because he was the carrier. And so he would, he only talks about it more now. We both do sort of further down the line, where he's like, I'd be coming to see you in Adelaide, because basically what we'd do is I would do Sunday to Thursday overnight in the hospital. And then he would drive down with the girls on the Friday afternoon, and then the girls and I would stay in a motel Friday, Saturday night, and he would do the hospital shift. And he's like, driving to and from there, he's like, I would just bawl my eyes out, but we didn't see a lot of that. And I think getting the diagnosis of Wiedemann's was a bit of a small mercy, because I wonder how that would have eaten away at him as Pippa got older.
Yeah. You talk about before being kind to yourself.
Yeah.
And we're not, like, we absolutely aren't until we realize how important it is. What sort of advice would you give to other people who are currently in your situation, but at the very early stages of your journey?
Yeah, my goodness. I think I already touched on it. It's, yes, there's other people worse off, but coming back to your hard is your hard. And I think that is just so important, where no one goes into pregnancy expecting to be one of those 1 in 5 babies that are born with a disability. And so I'll try not to get onto my soapbox, where, we really as a society have a lot to do in terms of changing the narrative around disability being this life sentence of, hell, where it's not. I say Pippa is the biggest gift. I could smother her with a pillow, don't get me wrong, but I think that's just parenting as well. You know what I mean? Like, welcome to parenthood.
You can do it to the children that don't have a disability.
Exactly. So I really think, and I'm really open about the fact that I would have walked past a family like mine before I had Pippa, and I would have felt sorry for them. I was such an ableist, and I was so uneducated and so misinformed. So I know that there are people currently sitting in NICU, sitting in hospital, sitting in the pediatrician office, who have just had their world axis turned upside down. And I get goosebumps just thinking about it. And my advice is to go, it's actually okay to be sad as well. You know, like I think the grief is really important, and you're not grieving because you would change your child, but you're grieving for what you thought life would look like. And I think that that's not spoken about, and there's a lot of guilt, particularly for mothers, because I am so confident in my love for Pippa and my family that you can, like, if people want to judge me when I'm like, Pippa's an asshole and I really grieved this and all that sort of thing, that's okay, because I know that I would walk over hot coals for her. And I'm also okay with being really sad that life is actually just going to be that little bit harder for her. We've started school, and so, you know, school is a massive transition, and I'm feeling a lot of like we're in a bit of a grief stage again, because starting school can be such a fun, exciting time, and, you know, really making friends and all that sort of stuff, and she's not doing that, you know, and it's because of her disability that she's not. And so I'm allowed to feel grief around that. Yeah. And so to the mums and the dads sitting in hospital doing all those things right now is grieve, because if you don't grieve and if you don't feel like crap, you actually can't move forward. And there is enough room for a lot of sadness, but also a lot of hope, and a lot of excitement. And I think I can also say it does get easier. You know, I don't know if it's just, I think it's we just get used to our little people. We get to know them. And so Pippa is by no means, I guess, an easy kid, but I feel like it's easier because I know where we're at. I know what we've got, you know, and yeah, I've changed. Yeah.
And look, and as parents, we read our children, right?
Yeah.
You know, when something's wrong or there's challenges, it's just natural for us to clue in on that. So it's
like at the minute, I read when I have to duck because I've got shit being thrown at me. You know what I mean? Like that's
natural instinct.
You know? Exactly. It's all ebbs and flows. Yeah.
What does Pippa's life look like today?
Pippa is living her best life today. So where we're at now, so Pippa has a peg. So for those of you listening who don't know, that's a tube in her tummy. So we changed from the nasogastric tube, which goes down their nose, and now she's got one in her tummy. We just use that for hydration. So she doesn't drink enough because she's still got a pretty dodgy swallow. However, we've gotten to the point where she can get all of her calories that she needs through her mouth, which is great. She has a terrible diet, but we're not needing to formula feed and sustain that. So that's really cool.
At the end of the food is food.
Yeah. Oh, what? So she has a chicken schnitzel for dinner every night. And God help me when we go out and you go somewhere and you order chicken nuggets and they're the breast nuggets and people think that's really healthy and really good. And I'm like, look, for my 10 and 8-year-old, absolutely. But I need the processed, horrible, additive-filled stuff because it's easy to chew. And it's just those little things like that you just don't expect, how you evolve. So at the minute, she has started prep. So we've repeated her in prep. So this is her second year. And we were only able to do that because we've been moving interstate because they don't actually allow them to repeat in Queensland.
It's a big fight. I had that fight with my
right?
That's
yeah.
Wow, okay. I'm originally from New South Wales, and we can do that if needed. Yeah.
Yeah. So kindy is easy, but prep's really hard. And so she did 6 months of prep in Victoria last year. And so then because we've moved here, we were able to. And I think there's a lot of social stuff. But anyway, so she's at prep and she has a mild intellectual disability. She has a low tone like struggles sort of moving, really crappy fine motor skills and all that sort of thing. So we are struggling with very big, hard to have feelings because of that intellectual disability. There's not that executive functioning there. So we are either living our best life or we are mad, and there is no in between.
Living our worst life.
Yeah. And so, but I think in terms of Pippa, outside of just being identified from her disability, people love her. She loves people. And wherever she is, like, people are just attracted to her, but she kind of doesn't give anyone a choice, because it's just, hi, she'd be like, hi, Kate, hi, Jen, hi, Kate, hi, Jen. And you'd be like, hi, Pip. And she'd still be going, hi, Kate, hi, Jen.
Aww.
And like, she just gives the best greetings, and she makes people feel like absolute rock stars when they rock up to the house, because it's like she hasn't seen you in years. And she's got just she's so good
from ear to ear.
Yeah, no, she's hilarious.
I've got a picture of her in my head.
Yeah, she's hilarious. She's great.
Is she still on oxygen, Hayley?
No, we're not. It's sort of one of those really hard things. So she, very understandably, she has quite a lot of medical trauma. And when you've had something up your nose and on your face for 2-3 years, you kind of don't want things touching your face. So she still has mild sleep apnea, but it's like she just would not tolerate oxygen. She just doesn't. So we're working with an airway dentist, which I didn't even know existed until we got to Brisbane. So that's really exciting. And it's just one of those things of where you choose your battles.
Yeah.
So we've done like the tonsils and adenoids and, done all that sort of low hanging fruit. Before she was obstructing 14 times an hour, whereas now, like, we're down to single figures. And she's not doing massive obstructions like where she's desaturating. So she's obstructing a lot, but she's moving around. But then it's that thing on she's not getting a great sleep. Sleep has probably been one of our trickiest things with Pippa.
And
so it's
behavior that affects
it's been, and it was even so, we need to medicate her to sleep. And we have, I think since she was 2, I think we started. But we're sort of torn because we can't give her all the really good stuff because she's got such shitty airways and low muscle tone and all that sort of thing. So we finally found something that is okay, and we can get, like, she goes to sleep now, and, she'll come into our bed and does most of the time go back to sleep, whereas we spent sort of from 0 to 5, she would wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. and that was the day started. And she would have a broken sleep sort of from 10 till that time she started. Like, I look back and I'm like, how did we survive on that?
And you do. You survive, don't you?
Yeah, you do. You do. There's no other choice, really.
Well, I say to people, you can't give them back. You can't give them where they came from.
Yeah. And when I went to NDIS for help around it, they just laughed at me. And so that was, I think that's been such a game changer, but we've still got a lot of work to do. And we do still get our odd 2 or 3 a.m. So, for example, Easter. We are excited about Easter.
Oh.
You get to eat chocolate for breakfast. I'm excited for Easter.
Not at 2:30 in the morning, you're not.
Oh, no, mate. I would have been happy with 2:30. So Easter Bunny was very lucky to be able to come because she went to bed at, I'm going to say 8. She woke up at 11 o'clock on Saturday night, 11 p.m. And she did not go back to sleep until she was drugged at 8 o'clock the following night. So, that's Pippa. And so it is to do with the proteins on her dodgy genes. They're a lot shorter and all that sort of stuff from the syndrome. So I guess that isn't unusual for us. So there's still those things around.
I remember when we were younger, and we're having trouble with my son sleeping, and he'd come into our bed every night and all the rest. And we were going to Agnes Waters this day, and we thought we'll get up, we'll leave at 5 o'clock on the dot. My son had other ideas. He was in our bed at 2:30, tossing, turning, ready to go. And I remember Adam and I just looked at each other at 3 o'clock and said, "This is ridiculous. Let's just get up and go." So we were, because we were awake. So what's the point in sitting there tossing and turning? We reached Agnes Waters so goddamn early we couldn't even get in. It is. It's that excitement of, wow, let's go, let's wake up the whole house.
Yeah. So and it's that impulse control and all that sort of stuff. So, I guess credit though is where any other kid, I'm assuming, would have at least crashed at some point, the next day. She can just keep going.
Energizer Bunny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hayley, is Pippa at a mainstream school?
She is. Yep.
And how have you found that introduction?
I know this is not everyone's story, but we so far have been incredibly lucky. The school the one in Victoria was amazing, and where we've landed in Queensland, every state is different. So we're originally from South Australia, but when we left SA, she wasn't school aged. But I just cannot fault the mainstream system and the school. I know it's very school specific, but what they have done to ensure a smooth transition without me having to fight, and it's so refreshing, because I have the privilege of talking to a lot of families of children with disabilities. And so when I go and pick her up in the afternoons, and there's already a social story in there about the cross country that we're doing in 3 weeks' time, without having to ask, and just little things like that, I'm just like, we have hit the jackpot. She is struggling, she's really struggling socially, and that sort of thing. She doesn't do well with kids her own age, because Pippa's world is Pippa's world, and I want to be your best friend, and I am going to be so up in your grill. But you want to go play on the swing? No, I want to go do this. So you're not my friend. You're being mean to me because you don't want to do what I want to do. So Pip connects really well with older kids, and she connects really well with younger kids, but she really does struggle with kids her own age. So that's hard, but it's also really nice that we don't have to then be worrying about everything else. We can sort of focus our time on building those social skills and that understanding, and not have to be fighting for supports in the classroom and that sort of stuff.
So, Hayley, can I ask, what are some misconceptions about living with a disability that you wish more people would know and understand?
Oh my goodness. I don't know if it's a misconception, but it's something I have learned, is that sometimes Dave and I are Pippa's biggest ceiling, and we just have to learn to get out of her way and let her, and it hurts, it's scary, the thought of letting your baby go and fail or, fall and that
Especially
sort of thing.
One with a disability.
Exactly. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that we think they can't do something, and then when we actually get out of their way, they surprise us, and I do think that, and I do see that a lot every day. We're very well-meaning parents, but it's just little things where Pippa could honestly, we're at the point where I think she could walk herself to school, by herself. And there will come a point where I need to get out of her way and let her do that. Me thinking that she wouldn't cope in OSH, for example. There's a difference at the minute between not coping in OSH and not wanting to go to OSH. So we're having massive behaviours in terms of going to out of school care, but in terms of she can cope, and she actually does really well there because we gave it a go. So I think it's I think one of the biggest misconceptions is thinking we need to wrap them in cotton wool. And yes, they need our fierce advocacy, and yes, they need our support, but they also need us to get out of their way and let them make their own path in the world. And I think that's that other misconception is disability means no independence. And I think that's something that we try really hard to, whilst Pippa has an intellectual disability and other things going on, we really do try to respect her decisions, and her voice. And, we have some very well-meaning people go, so, you'll have to think about long-term a room for Pippa, like when she's 20, 30, 40. You and Dave with your plans. And I'm like, I don't think so. She's not living at home forever. It's those sorts of things, because whilst could she live by herself when she's 30 years old? No. But with the right support system and things and fierce advocacy from mum and dad, absolutely she will be living independently. No 30-year-old wants to be, well, actually, I want to live with my mum and dad, but you get what I'm saying,
We hear that over and over again on this podcast, and you'll notice our logo, Navigating Disability. It was only after we did quite a few podcasts that we realised it's actually not the disability. We need to focus on their abilities.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that every child has potential, whether it's here or whether it's here, it doesn't matter, but they have to be given the opportunity to reach.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that thing on, I noticed that teachers, when we go in to talk about Pippa's academic stuff, she is worlds behind her peers and they're really nervous. And I'm like, mate, I am under no illusion that my child is not going to be an engineer. Okay. But what's really important for me is that she is learning and she is growing, and that she feels confident and safe and she's making friends. And so but Pippa will work, you know what I mean? And that's, someone actually said to me that, aren't you glad that you've had her done for intellectual disability and her IQ is in the limit with Services Australia, that you don't have to provide additional evidence to qualify for the disability support pension? And I'm just like, is that really your hope for your kids? You know what I mean? I'm like, that's from
what a silly thing to say, and insensitive.
Yeah. We see it every day. There's parents like us where we are such strong advocates and will do anything for our children. But then we also have clients that see their child and see them as they are, and that is all they'll ever be. And they don't put in the time, they don't put in the intervention because they don't believe they've got the potential. And that just breaks my heart. Absolutely breaks my heart, because everybody has potential.
Yeah. Like Pippa will be working, like I see her as the door greeter at Bunnings and at Kmart and that sort of stuff, because she's really great with routine and consistency. And it would be like, hello, what are you after? Oh, you want nails? That's aisle 9. Like, have a great day, like screaming at them as they I just think that's great.
So I want to know where she's working, because I'll be going.
Exactly. So it's that thing on, don't get me wrong, we are putting provisions aside, when you sit down and do your will, when you have a kid with a disability, it's definitely, because we're having to make decisions. Do we put her stuff into a disability estate? And do we, we're like, well, she's probably realistically not going to have the capacity to earn the level of income like her neurotypical sisters. Yes, you need to be realistic, but it's like, mate, you get your butt out there and you get out there working. There is no reason, especially with NDIS, there is absolutely no reason that she should not be living an independent, fulfilling life.
And how is the relationship between her two older sisters?
They are amazing.
Excellent.
They are amazing. We're noticing a little bit more, conflict is a strong word, but it's definitely getting trickier as they get older, and their tolerance is starting to get a little bit smaller, but we're also very prepubescent and that sort of thing.
Oh,
That also because their world is widening and opening up for them, probably more so than it is for Pippa.
No, Pippa is hard work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pippa is hard work. So Pippa, she defaults to trashing the joint. She defaults to, if she doesn't get her own way, she will hit, she will throw, she will scream. So, you know, if you're in Pippa's world, you're very much in Pippa's world. And I think the girls, we have worked really hard. There's sometimes where we need to follow through on something with Pippa. I don't know. I can't believe I can't think of something. But, you know, let's just say she's grabbed her lunch box and she's thrown it at me. We need to follow through on saying that's not okay. Now, really, Pippa, might as well be telling her that the sky's pink. You know what I mean? Like it, but I'm doing it more for Maggie and Aria, so that they can see that there's, you know, that there is that follow through. But I think the gift is they understand, and they will understand equality versus equity already. And, you know, whilst it's not ideal, you know, they are amazing, empathetic, beautiful humans, and they still would be, but I don't think they would be at the level they are if they didn't have Pippa.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, for any person that has a relationship with someone with a disability, it really life becomes so much clearer and so much more understanding for everybody around us. I feel like we haven't even touched on your journey. But
I know, I'm sorry. I keep
That's okay.
going.
We can have another one. We do need to start to wrap up. What are your hopes for the future for the disability community, for people like Pippa, and in the current environment? What are your hopes both for the community as a whole?
My goodness. Look, I think given what are we? We're the 1st of May 2025, and I hope we can listen back on this in 5, 10, 15 years' time, because at the minute, clarity is the word that just keeps coming up. So I am fortunate enough to work in the National Disability Insurance Scheme sector. And I work with parents, and all that comes up at the minute is fear and clarity, like fear and lack of clarity, which is really, really validated at the minute. So I hope for the collective future is that we can get to the point where there's actually, I can talk about Pippa having a job, living independently, and there's no that back of your mind going, or if we can get the NDIS funding for it, or, you know what, even moving away from NDIS being the disability oasis, if we as a society, because that's really how we've gotten into this mess as well, is NDIS has become the disability oasis, and the rest of mainstream and just community have gone, oh, well, you've got NDIS, that it's not our responsibility to be inclusive. So I think we need to move from NDIS being the oasis and just go, you know what, if you as a community, if you're not seeing disabled people access your community, then your community is not accessible, because it's not that people without disabilities are not there. It's just that they can't engage with you. So I really hope that inclusion is not a buzzword and it's not even a thought, because it's just the way it is. How awesome would that be? It's like I wouldn't even need to spruik, hey, we're an inclusive club. You know, Pippa does cheerleading. It is the love of her life. And the owner of the gym says that she's asked all the time to do inclusive, like disability specific classes. And she's like, no, I absolutely refuse, because I believe there is a place for every athlete on all the teams, you know, and that to me, that gives me goosebumps, because I'm like, yeah, it is.
Not many people out there like that.
No. And this is a proper cheerleading gym. You know, they are fantastic. And Pippa is treated like every other athlete. And it's sort of like, as I've been sitting there, I can see only because I'm in the sector, but I can see the older kids with disabilities. I'm more like that intellectual disability and low tone and that sort of thing. And they are up with the comp teams, but it's the thing on they might be standing as a side base or, doing something. They're not so much flying in the air, but they are there and they are shouting and they are included and they are having the time of their life. And I think that is just awesome.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely correct. The NDIS has been described as the lifeboat of people with with disabilities, but it really is the whole community's. I'm not going to say problem. That's not the word. The whole community needs
responsibility.
Responsibility. That's the exact word. It's the whole community responsibility.
Yeah, and so we've actually stopped Pippa's physio because she does cheer twice a week, and she's doing all the things in cheer that she would be doing in physio, and now I can spend that money on social skills, and developing those life things because she's getting what she needs from the community, which I just think is pretty bloody awesome.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
What does the future hold for Hayley and her family?
Well, we are new Queensland residents, and I'm going to say we are permanent residents for now. We've just finished travelling Australia in a caravan. So we are just really boring. We're sickeningly boring, which is great. So yeah, we've found Brisbane. We love it. And so we're just really head down, bum up, enjoying my babies while they still want to be part of, have me around. And getting them through school. That's where we are. And me professionally, I will continue to be working in the NDIS sector, even if it turns me grey. And I feel really fortunate that even though it's hard, I love what I do and I love going to work and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I feel really sickeningly content at the minute.
Hayley, that's just an amazing way to end from where you've come from to now being content and happy and loved. I really hope that our listeners who are out there can come away with that connection and hope that you've shown, because that's what we're trying to pass on. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely speaking to you. We may have you back to discuss the second half of your journey.
Part 2. Stay tuned. Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Have a lovely day.
Thanks, Hayley.